All right, good morning. If you're now joining, this is live currently, and the United Nations Human Rights Committee continues the grilling of Gil Teixeira and the PPP regime. As you know, they have already started their propaganda in their local newspaper. The We know what those propaganda newspapers or outlets are. We know, but if you want to get the accurate news, just you know um, listen to what um, independent news agencies and dependable news agencies have to say about the United Nations Human Rights Committee's report on the grilling of Gil Teixeira and others. Good morning to you wherever you are, and we are glad that you have taken the time to tune in. Please share the link and let folks know that this very important sitting is about to start. If you can give us a quick indication as to where you are and listening to us from, we'll be more than happy to hear that. But for now, just saddle up and be prepared.
Yeah, my name is Jasmine Caldata Francis Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my ex next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data.
Oh, Jesus Christ, if cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. Flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta give a $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now. A weekend man, a monthly man, and a fortnight man.
Yeah, my name is Jasmine Caldata Francis Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my ex next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data. I have none.
You could probably, on the
part of our interactive dialogue with Guyana. We welcome the delegation, those members who are here in the Conference Room in Geneva, and those also joining us from Georgetown. We'll begin with the first on the list of speakers from the committee side. Mr. Carazzo, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. And once again, from my side, a welcome to the delegation of Guyana. Good morning to those joining us from Georgetown, and a good afternoon to those who are here in the conference room in Geneva. I will touch briefly on questions under paragraph 18, which is on liberty and security of the person.
Legislation regulating processes for lawful arrests is appropriate, as are also regulations on informing detainees on their rights. Yet there is a widespread practice of arbitrary and unlawful arrest by police officers and subsequent unlawful detention of civilians, including minors, as we have been reported. The use of force by police officers is governed by the police standard operating procedures. Breach of any of the provisions entitles the affected person to seek relief in court. Such breaches must also be reported to the Police Complaints Authority, which, together with the Police Service Commission, provide oversight against professional misconduct by members of the police force. Could the delegation provide statistics on this procedure, since the report lacks information about the number of investigations, convictions, and punishments undertaken following complaints of arbitrary and unlawful arrest and detention? No report is made on the existence of a system of restitution for people falsely deprived of their liberty. Does the system provide the services of public defenders to assist detainees without pay? Specific information on the measures taken to address prolonged pretrial detention and increase the use of the use of non-custodial alternatives was to be provided by the state party in the report. Please provide the requested information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carazo, for that intervention. The next speaker is Mr. El Haiba. Mr. El Haiba, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. I would like once again to extend a very cordial welcome to the delegation of Guyana. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank them for the information that they have shared with the committee yesterday and the day before yesterday. Today, I will be tackling 2 points. The first is questions under paragraph 19, which is on liberty and security of the person, and then the second set of questions under paragraph 20, which deals with elimination of slavery, servitude, and trafficking in persons. So beginning with paragraph 19, I do want to come back to the questions that were previously asked about the freedom and security of the person, but I'll approach it from a different angle this time. I would like to ask what specific measures have been taken by the state party to guarantee that children or juveniles in conflict with the law be treated in such a way as to prioritize their social reintegration. I would ask the state party to provide us with details on the nature and duration of penalties and sentences handed down to minors during the reporting period. Now, the committee has taken note of the adoption of the 2018 law on justice for minors. And against that backdrop, we'd like to ask the state party what measures have been taken to guarantee that detention of children is used solely as a last resort and for the shortest possible period. We would also ask what measures have been taken to ensure that children are detained and held separately from adults in line with international standards. Finally, under paragraph 19, the committee would like information from the state party as to any difficulties that it encountered in applying the aforementioned law on justice for minors, particularly in terms of resources and capacity. I will now turn to my questions under paragraph 20, elimination of slavery, servitude, and trafficking in persons. The committee has taken note of the significant steps taken by the state party in this area. Nonetheless, we would ask the delegation to provide us with information on concrete measures, i.e. strategies and action plans that have been enacted and rolled out to tackle human trafficking and child labor, in particular in rural areas. We have received information according to which children are employed in dangerous jobs, and we would like the state party to comment on these reports. According to the reports, children are working in mining, forestry, agriculture, fishing, and in manufacturing. And there is also concern about child labor, specifically in Amerindian communities. And so again, we'd ask the state party to comment on that. The state party is committed to prohibiting child labor. And so against that backdrop, I'd like you to comment on information we have received, according to which the number of children in conflict with the law and the number of street children have risen. We would also ask you to provide us with information on the process that went into drafting the National Action Plan to eliminate child labor covering the period 2019 to 2025. So as I say, if you could provide us with information on the drafting process that went into that action plan, including information on the stakeholders that were involved in that drafting process. I would like also to ask what specific measures have been taken by the state party to ensure that children are registered at birth and have access to identity documents. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your responses. Thank you very much, Mr. El Khaiber, for those questions. The next speaker on the list is Mr. Quesada. Mr. Quesada, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. And a cordial welcome from my side to the Guyanese delegation. I would like as a preface to my questions to thank them for the replies that they provided yesterday, and also thank them in advance for the answers that we will receive this afternoon. And speaking of this afternoon, I will be asking questions on issues related to paragraphs 21 and 24 of the list of issues. Beginning with paragraph 21, I would like to focus here specifically on requests for information related to access to justice. Firstly, with regard to the significant backlog in cases before the courts, the state party informed the committee about progress that has been made in reducing the backlog of civil cases following the introduction of new civilian proceedings norms in 2016. Nonetheless, we lack more specific and precise information about the level of backlog in criminal cases as opposed to civil cases. And so I would ask the delegation of the state party to share with the committee whether there is indeed a backlog in criminal cases and in the processing and handling of same. And if there is indeed such a backlog in criminal cases, we would welcome numbers and statistics. In addition to the step taken to convert transport containers into hearing chambers in prisons to improve the efficiency of the system for persons in pretrial detention, and I take that information from the state party's third periodic report, I'd like to ask what other measures have been adopted by the state party to make headway in reducing the delays as well as the backlog in criminal trials and criminal proceedings. Have any new criminal courts been set up and opened over the last few years? I turn now to my second question under paragraph 21. In the list of issues, the committee requested the state party to provide statistical data on the free legal aid system in the country. We asked particularly for A, details on the number and type of cases for which free legal aid has been requested, the number of type of cases in which free legal aid was granted, and the number of type of cases in which free legal aid was denied during the reporting period. This information was not provided in the third periodic report, so I'd ask the delegation of the state party to provide us with that data, with those statistics and numbers now. Finally, under paragraph 21, I would like to ask whether the state party has adopted measures to improve access to justice for residents in rural and remote areas, including the interior of the country, as well as for members of indigenous communities. And on a related note, we'd like to ask how you guarantee access to free legal aid from persons living in remote and rural and interior areas and from indigenous communities. I turn now to a set of questions under paragraph 24, which deals with the treatment of aliens, including refugees and asylum seekers. I have the following questions under this heading. Firstly, in its third periodic report, the state party indicated that Guyana was not in a position currently to prioritize a comprehensive national legislation on refugees and asylum procedures, but that it would keep the issue under review and may move to review it or to consider it later. So I'd like to ask whether since the submission of your report in which you made that point, you have actually begun any legislative process to address the need for comprehensive legislation on refugees and asylum processes. Would also like to ask the state party whether you have considered the possibility of acceding to the Refugee Status Convention of 1954 and its 1967 protocol. My second question under paragraph 24. We have been made aware of complaints pertaining to discrimination and ill treatment meted out against Haitian migrants, including reports of detention in inhumane conditions. We have also been informed that the government is said to have issued an order removing Haitian migrants from the list of foreign nationals who can enter Guyana and remain in the country for a period of up to 6 months visa-free. Such a measure would be a violation of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, according to which Haitians, in their capacity as nationals of a member state of CARICOM, Haiti has been a member of CARICOM since July 2002, would have automatic right of entry and the right to remain 6 months visa-free in Guyana, because they are both members of CARICOM. So I'd like to ask the delegation of the State Party to explain the grounds for this measure, which has so adversely impacted the right to enter and remain visa-free for 6 months of Haitian nationals in Guyana. I'd also like to ask a specific question about the status and situation of Haitian asylum seekers. Are they subject to these same restrictions on their right to entry and right to remain, etc.? My third question under paragraph 24, and here I reiterate one of the questions contained in our list of issues. The committee would like to ask the State Party about the measures that it has adopted to prevent and combat the trafficking of refugee women and girls, and particularly those coming from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, as well as steps taken by Guyana to guarantee protection and assistance to victims of this trafficking. Finally, I'd like to address the lack of domestic legislation on asylum and highlight the fact that Guyana is not a state party to the Refugee Status Convention of 1951. And given that that is the case, how does the state party guarantee the principle of non-refoulement, of non-return? It is our understanding that with regard to nationals of Venezuela, who are the victims of forced displacement, the government of Guyana has applied a humanitarian policy which allows these Venezuelans to enter the country and to remain without risk of refoulement or return. And so I'd like to ask whether this same humanitarian policy is applied to nationals of other countries, including nationals from Haiti. Those are my questions for the time being, and once again, I look forward to your answers. Thank you very much, Mr. Quesada. The next speaker on the list is Mr. Helfer. Mr. Helfer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my thanks again to the delegation for a robust exchange of views and dialogue over a range of different issues. Today, I will focus on freedom of expression and the rights of Indigenous peoples. Beginning with freedom of expression, the committee is concerned about reports that more than 90% of mass media are either controlled by the state party or owned by Indo-Guyanese who support the government. The committee is also aware of reports of politicization in the media. For example, we have received information indicating that the National Broadcasting Authority, whose board members are appointed by the president, lacks full independence and impartiality, a concern that extends to the authority's regulatory and licensing decisions. Please comment on these reports, and please explain how the state party will ensure that the media in Guyana is independent and that opposition voices are not censored. The state party indicates in its report that its officials do not harass media workers critical of the government. However, the committee is aware of credible reports of such harassment. This includes incidents involving senior government officials. For example, journalists affiliated with the K-Etur News, forgive me if I mispronounce that, were heckled by government supporters at an April 2023 presidential press conference. In addition, reports indicate that officials are often intolerant of journalists who question the government's policies, especially in the extractive sector. The committee is further concerned by reports of surveillance of journalists, media workers, and human rights defenders. This includes the government's use of spyware to monitor journalists. Would the state party please comment on these reports? In addition, please indicate what measures the government is taking to prevent harassment against media workers and human rights defenders. Next, the committee is aware that public officials have filed defamation lawsuits against journalists and media groups that are critical of the government. For example, the former Deputy Chief Election Officer, Roxanne Myers, sued the broadcaster Newsroom for alleged libelous statements, and former President David Granger sued Guyana Times and other newspapers claiming that they tarnished his reputation. The committee is concerned that these defamation lawsuits may chill the exercise of free expression. Will the state party please comment on these incidents? The state party has also indicated that it would decriminalize defamation. However, it appears that defamation remains a criminal act under the 1959 Defamation Act and under Article 113 of the Criminal Law Offenses Act. Reports also indicate that the 2018 cybercrime law has been used to silence government critics on social media, including prosecutions of social media influencers. For example, in December of 2023, the Guyana Police Force served a court summons on political activist Rickford Burke for criticism of the government shared online. The committee is also concerned by the vague and subjective language in Section 18, the so-called sedition clause, that criminalizes online speech critical of the government. What measures will the state party take to decriminalize defamation and to ensure that a climate of online intimidation is not allowed to flourish? Turning to the rights of indigenous peoples, the committee regrets that the Amerindian Act of 2006 has not yet been amended, although the revision process was started in 2020. We have also received reports that the state party has not been fully transparent regarding the process and timeline for revisions, and that the views of indigenous communities are not adequately considered. Please update the committee on the revisions to the Amerindian Act. And I also reiterate a question asked by my colleague, Ms. Tagruja, earlier: how specifically does the state party ensure that consultations with indigenous communities are inclusive and representative? Next, the committee is concerned by reports that the Amerindian land titling project has been significantly delayed and is not operating effectively. For example, only 6 certificates of title were issued in 2023, despite the allocation of significant government funding to the project. What steps is the state party planning to take to expedite this process? The committee understands that the state party has entered into mining agreements, including with Golden Shield Resources, without an environmental permit. We are also concerned by reports that expansions of agreements with other extraction industries were adopted without seeking the informed consent of, among others, the Waipi-Chan people or their representatives in the South Rupununi District Council. What steps will the state party take to ensure proper environmental review and consultation with Amerindian communities for extractive projects and to protect indigenous sacred and cultural sites and the surrounding ecosystem? My final question concerns the state party's response to the recent decision of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in the Isineru versus Guyana case, which found multiple violations of the rights of the Isineru people. What measures has Guyana taken, or what measures will it take to implement the Commission's recommendations? And how will the state party ensure that the Isineru people receive reparations for the violations identified? Those are my questions for today, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Helfer, for those questions. The next speaker on the list is Ms. Tagruja. Ms. Tagruja, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. And I, in my turn, would like to welcome the delegation for this, the third part of our discussions. I would like to begin by circling back to a point that I raised yesterday. I asked a question as to why the previous chair of the Environmental Protection Agency, Mr. Vincent Adams, was replaced with the arrival into office of the current government. And the reply, if I understood it correctly, was that Mr. Adams was behind the agreement between the government of Guyana and ExxonMobil signed in 2016, the Protection Sharing Agreement, and thus was implicitly involved in the allegations of corruption surrounding that agreement. However, according to information we've received, in 2016, Mr. Adams was not working for the Environmental Protection Authority. He only began his mandate on the 1st of October 2018, so 2 years and 3 months after the signature of the Protection Sharing Agreement. So I'd like to ask the delegation to come back to this point in order to make sure that the committee has available to it clear, specific and credible information on this concern. I now come to my questions under paragraph 23, participation in public affairs. And under this heading, I have 3 clusters of concerns. I'd like to make it clear to the delegation that some of the issues and concerns I will raise, some of the questions I will ask, take up points made by the European Union during its election observation mission in 2023. It echoes some of the concerns that they had. So my first broad group of concerns and questions concerns the structure of the electoral system itself, which is built around two political parties since independence from the UK in 1966, and which has led to the polarization of political life on an ethnic basis. This has led, and we saw this in the 2020 elections, but it's a general concern, to an exacerbation of hate speech, to mis and disinformation, which Mr. Helfer already touched upon, and a hostile climate based on ethnic divide. Moreover, given that this complex electoral system is founded on this ethnically based bipartisan logic, it leaves out in the cold the indigenous people who have just been referred to by Mr. Helfer, who are, to borrow the European Union's word, absent from political life, despite the fact that they make up 10% of the population. Without going into the technical detail, the principal difficulty in this electoral system is that it does not allow one to set aside ethnic divide, and it does not foster inter-ethnic cooperation between the parties. The delegation referred itself yesterday to the ongoing constitutional reform, and against that backdrop, I'd like to ask the State Party what measures are envisaged to amend the electoral system in order to promote pluralism and to put an end to this bipartisan logic which currently prevails, and thus to allow new political parties which are not set up on an ethnic basis to participate in the electoral process. My second group of questions pertains to the Electoral Commission, which is based on this same ethnically based bipartisan logic or mindset, and thus excludes members coming from other parties or from indigenous peoples. And that absence was also highlighted by the European Union in its 2023 report. We have received several credible allegations and information about a lack of independence and impartiality and a lack of effectiveness in terms of the Electoral Commission, particularly when it comes to guaranteeing pluralism, which is one of this body's responsibilities. I'd like to ask the State Party delegation, how does the Electoral Commission function? How does it monitor the financing of political parties and electoral campaigns? According to information we have received, this financing in these campaigns lacks sufficient transparency. I'd also like to ask what role the Electoral Commission takes in resolving electoral disputes, another issue raised by the European Union. My colleague, Mr. Santos Pais, will come back on problems linked to the judiciary. But given that appointments to the benches of the Court of Appeal and High Court are much delayed, what role do the courts play in the resolution of electoral issues currently? I have a similar set of questions under my third broad grouping, which is about the right of persons with disabilities and persons in pretrial detention to vote. I hark back to the endemic problem of pretrial detention in the State Party, which can often last for years. However, pretrial detention results in an automatic removal of the right to vote, which is a concern. Our concerns about the rights to vote of persons with disabilities surround the fact that the Electoral Commission has not implemented measures that would allow persons with disabilities to vote in the 2020 elections, which is not just a violation of Article 25, but also violates non-discrimination. Against that backdrop, I ask a very straightforward question. What measures are envisaged for the upcoming elections that would allow persons with disabilities, as well as persons in pretrial detention, to exercise their electoral rights? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that intervention, Mr. Grudges, as the Chair. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Santos Pais. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon to everyone that is witnessing this review online. First, since it's the first time that I take the floor, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Honorable Minister Gail Teixeira and her delegation. I would touch upon problems relating to independence of the judiciary. According to the National Constitution of Guyana, the President appoints the Chancellor and Chief Justice, the two most senior judicial officials, after obtaining the agreement of the leader of the opposition party. The Judicial Services Commission, to which the head of delegation referred several times, which was not constituted for 6 years until July 2023, is composed of the Chancellor and Chief Justice, with other members also appointed by the President after meaningful consultation with the leader of the opposition. The President appoints further judges and part-time judges with the advice of the Judicial Services Commission, and the Judicial Services Commission appoints other legal officers. Therefore, both the executive and legislative interfere with the appointment of judges. Moreover, it has been the practice of several presidents not to confirm the substantive appointment of judges, but to keep them in an acting position, thus affecting negatively their employment and other benefits, as well as hampering their security of tenure. This seems to be currently the case for the head of the judiciary. The entire judiciary is therefore under some degree of influence and control by the executive president of Guyana and the parliament, entailing the politicization of the judiciary and delays in appointment of judges, leading to a significant backlog of legal cases in both criminal, especially at pretrial stages, and civil courts. How is then the independence of both judges and prosecutors ensured? How many representatives of judges and the direction of public prosecution are there in the Judicial Services Commission? Are there specific rules laid down in the law on the appointment of judges and prosecutors, their career, promotion, discipline, and particularly removal? Since the constitutional process is now underway, is there any intention to create a self-governing body or bodies that would deal with all aspects relating to the career of both judges and prosecutors, and where these judicial officers would have the majority, therefore avoiding any type of undue interference by other branches of government? What is currently the gender representation as regards both judges and prosecutors? And finally, what measures have been taken to secure equitable access to justice and strengthen the public confidence in the judiciary and the direction of public prosecution? Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santos Paez, for your comments. Which brings us now to the 10-minute break and give the delegation an opportunity to go over their replies.
Well, that's the first round of this Human Rights Commission, and grilling the regime. They have taken a 10 minutes break, and I assume that the 10 minutes break is to allow Gail Teixeira to saddle up in her seat. And we already know what those responses are going to be. They are going to talk, first of all, as to how media houses are being treated equally across the board in Guyana, and that there is no discrimination. Already, we know that that is a big lie. Discrimination upon discrimination, it happens. And I can just say, as for us at 107.1 FM, we have never received, and I repeat, we have never received since August of 2020 a single state ad. I repeat, not a single state ad in terms of discrimination. During the pandemic, there were media houses, there are media houses, that are connected to the PPP regime. And those media houses have been awarded with millions upon millions upon millions of Guyana dollars, hundreds of millions of Guyana dollars with state ads. Let us take, for example, a serving minister of the regime. A serving minister of the regime, Anand Prasad, he is said to be the owner of national telecommunications network. And also, that's a television station and a radio station. And if you're to check the record as to the amount of dollars, millions of dollars, NTN radio and television they have received since 2020, it amounts to over quarter billion Guyana dollars. And those are two entities set to be owned by or partially owned by Anand Prasad, who sits there as the junior minister within the Ministry of Local Government, the minister. And so that's what's happening. And when you look at NCN, the National Communications Network, um, they received over, and I repeat, they have received over $1 billion+ worth of ads since 2020. The same for the Guyana Chronicle. And let's put aside now the Guyana Times that is owned by a friend. I don't know if Jack Dio is part owner of that, but it is owned by a friend of Jack Dio, a personal friend of Jack Dio. Some people say business partner. I don't know whether that is accurate. I am not going to give my mouth liberty to say that it is accurate or not. I wish you can see my facial expression, but I honestly don't know whether it is accurate or not. But what we do know is that Bobby Ramroop is a friend of Barra Jack Dio. I'm putting aside the fact that majority of the pharmaceutical drugs contracts go to GPC, which is owned by Bobby Ramroop. Well, it tells another story. But putting that pharmaceutical drugs aside and the billions of dollars that goes to that company, let us deal with the media. Bobby Ramroop, Jagdale's friend, owns Channel 28, which was taken away from Tony Vera. Tony Vera lay back, just throw himself down on the ground, sprawl his legs, sprawl his hands in the air, and surrendered Channel 28. When he surrendered Channel 28 and the property and all whatever that goes with it, I don't know the circumstances, but they basically ripped Tony Vera apart, ripped him naked financially speaking. And so when we look at the evidence in terms of discrimination of the media, especially those of us who are not pro PPP, who are not pro government, or do not spread the propaganda that the PPP wants folks to spread. So when we look at the ads distribution as it pertains to Channel 28, owned by Bobby Ramroop, and the radio station, they have received over $500 million from 2020 to now. Over $500 million. Now compare that to, and I can just speak of Pen Shop Radio, which is actually a radio station. 107.1 FM. It's a radio station. It's not a Facebook. I'm speaking to you guys on Facebook here. We might not have that sort of reach as yet on the ground via the radio station. That is, of course, as a result of being strangled economically by the PPP regime, where they believe that the billions and the trillions of dollars they have access to belongs to them. Jagdeo Daddy and Imami dead and left all of that money for him. And same for Irfan Ali. Well, his parents are alive, not calling anything bad on anybody's parents, but they believe that they own Guyana. And so they are going to starve Ben Shap Radio of any ads because they do not like Ben Shap's views. That Ben Shap is anti-government. And so because of that, nothing for him. And it's okay. We have been surviving and we continue to survive. As it pertains to Channel 9, radio and news, I can't speak for them at this point in time. But what I do know is that they experience discrimination as it pertains to ads. I don't know, they probably get some crumbs, if at all they get any. I cannot speak for Bobby Vera's radio station. I hardly hear from Bobby. Bobby is the best person to come out to say whether he gets ads or not. But I suspect he gets his little thing here and there. And if you know Bobby, Bobby is quite contented with his little thing here and there in terms of crumbs. Um, and this is not knocking Bobby. Bobby knows how to survive. He has been survived for many years, mind you. And so that's how they discriminate against media houses, radio stations, and television stations that are not spreading their propaganda. It is unfair to us, yes, but what are we going to do at 107.1 FM? Continue to sit and put our hands up and complain? No, the show has got to go on. um, GNBA makes contact with, oh, okay, you owe us money. You have, okay, fair enough. You guys, and that's, I'm giving you guys a feedback as to how they discriminate and how they go after media houses, and so forth and so on. Um, it's just what happens, and I'm glad that the United Nations um, committee have decided to bring that particular issue up and to expose the discrimination, the racial and the political discrimination as it pertains to media houses in Guyana. And of course, again, 107.1 FM, we are victims of the regime's spiteful, racist, and discriminatory practices since 2020. Um, as it pertains to the COVID-19 crisis, many media houses connected, legitimate media houses connected to the PPP regime, and even those that are not legitimate. For example, we take this individual, you guys know how I feel with calling certain people's names. Um, you guys know how I feel. So this sorry, you already know who that individual is, receives millions upon millions, so far over $200 million worth of ads. And this is not a legitimate media house. It is just not a legitimate media house. And they stifle legitimate media houses because of their political views and give it to cricketer individuals who do not have radio or television license, but they operate through a Facebook page. And those individuals seem to be lucky, the lucky ones, when compared to folks like us who actually do own a radio station or a television station in Guyana. The other thing that was talked about briefly is the use of the Cybercrime Act and to go after political opponents. Lots of individuals have been targeted. We have Rhonda Lane and scores of other folks. Rhonda Lane was wrongfully charged. She was convicted and had to pay a sum of $500,000, even though there's hardly any evidence, none whatsoever against her. She had to pay over $500,000. She is a political activist. She is a brave woman on the ground. I didn't hear that she was mentioned in terms of for target. There are other folks who were targeted on the ground, and Rickford Burke being targeted as well. His name was mentioned in the report, and because it is widespread. You guys know when you scratch Rickford going to scratch you guys back, which is good. You scratch gets scratched back. See, they're about to restart, so I'll hand you guys back over to them.
Now. You have approximately 27 minutes for your replies. Head of Delegation, Madam Gail Teixeira, it is a pleasure to listen to you once again. You have the floor.
Afternoon in Geneva. Thank you very much for allowing us to appear before you as we have for the last 2 days. We want to, before we go into today's questions, which are many, yesterday I counted approximately 50 questions in the first round, and you must appreciate it's difficult to provide all the information that is requested in that short period. However, we want to just clarify a number of things that came up yesterday, and one of those issues was raised by one of the persons today, one of the committee members today. First of all, an issue was raised yesterday about children in detention, and a reference was made to a report of children being held in Hugo Chavez's house and the night shelter. We wish to go on record that these two residences are not detention centers. They are places where we house persons who are in difficult circumstances and who are homeless, or we have no place to put them. And so these are not places of detention, and the children were not kept in detention. There are adults there, but this was not a correct reflection. Maybe it was the way the question was posed, but we want to make that very clear, that a place is only a place of detention if appointed by the Minister of Home Affairs and gazetted. Hugo Chavez and the night shelter are not in that category. The second issue regarding the director of EPA. The question yesterday came in regards to requesting the qualifications and on what basis or process regarding the appointment of the director of the EPA. We find this a rather odd question that the committee would ask us regarding an appointment of a person that's appointed by a statutory board under law in our country. We found it strange, and that we explained that there was a board, the Environment Protection Agency board, that would have gone through. In fact, the present director has been in the EPA working there years before. The issue regarding the former director. The former director did not appear to have a problem when he was there from 2019 onwards to implement the production sharing agreement of 2016, which we all know is flawed and which we cannot change at this point. And so, because it is contract law. And so that was a reference made, but we do not feel that it's appropriate to ask a country in regards to appointment of a person who is appointed by a board of our country. The boards are covered by law and who comprises it. We also want to make it very clear. There were some questions asked about government and investigations. In case we misunderstood it, that we want to make it very clear that the government does not investigate. Police and other statutory and constitutional bodies do. There was an issue raised about the EITI, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. We wish to advise the committee that this is headed by a multi-stakeholder group that has 3 representatives of civil society, 3 representatives of the industry, and 3 representatives of the government. And that is the body that oversights the monitoring and preparation of Guyana's reports to the EITI. In case there's any misunderstanding, Guyana civil society organizations are quite large, not very strong, many of them, but nevertheless, we have a good spectrum of civil society organizations across the country and in the capital. This ministry has a national stakeholders forum with a directory of NGOs that are over 100. And we have consultations from time to time with them. But we wish to point out the breadth and the scope of these civil society organizations include women's groups from across the country, youth groups across the country, trade union representatives, trade unions, the private sector bodies, which are several, the indigenous organizations, including the National Two Shouts Council, the religious organizations, Christian, Hindu, and Muslim, which are the largest group of within the national stakeholders, and special interest LGBTQI, or those that are specifically dealing with HIV/AIDS or specific areas of children. The importance of the consultative process we keep referring to when we represent ourselves here is built into legislation. It is built into how we do our work in the regards to oil revenue, in terms of the constitutional reform process, and in terms of appointments. Our constitution and our parliament has written into the constitution and the standing orders of the parliament that in terms of appointments of people, nominees, I explained that yesterday, 2 constitutional bodies, that is a broad sweep of inclusion of NGOs. In fact, to do with the Ethnic Relations Commission, approximately 168 NGOs, civil society bodies, were consulted in a very organized framework and guidelines to ensure that the process was transparent by the civil society organizations. If I were to return to the questions that have been asked today, maybe I should start. I'm not going to be able to go in any sequential order, but I will try to answer as quickly as I can. There was a comment made about the media being controlled 90% by the state. And we wish to present to you, and we will share this document with you as we are sharing other documents that we cannot go into all the details here. But in 2014, this government, who was in office then, authorized the National Frequency Movement Unit to release a protracted freeze on frequency allocation, making available 97 new broadcast frequencies. There are 21 television stations, of which only 1 is owned and operated by the state. 24 radio stations, with 8 of those owned and operated by the state, and 4 daily newspapers, as well, and with only 1 being state-owned, and 3 newspapers that are weekly. Therefore, the vast majority of the media is privately owned. It is rather disingenuous for persons to report to this committee that although the private media, that they are aligned to the government. So having been able to prove that 90%, a claim of 90% of radio monopoly is under the control of the government, being able to debunk that, then the response now is, oh, all those are also supporters of the government. But I wish the government was so popular and had such massive support across the country. In fact, that is not so. We have majority support, but not in the way it's being conveyed here, or by persons or information shared with the committee, but that the majority of the media is privately owned, and that if one were to check the newspapers of Guyana and the television stations, that one would find that they're quite independent with their views, including the coverage of our appearance before this committee. We also want to advise that there are a number of talk shows across multiple broadcast social media platforms with no interference from the government. So that is one issue I want to respond, because it's a very serious charge and also based on misinformation. The National Broadcast Association is appointed not by a series of issues in terms of who sits on it, including the leading opposition as a nominee on it. Regarding it's going back to the freedom of expression and freedom of the press. There are issues being raised here about matters that relate to private business, such as the media houses. The government is unable and unwilling to respond on issues that relate to private companies and the business of those private companies at this forum. Regarding the issues of press harassment, and specifically in relation to the former government, these are matters that have caused outcries by various society, including the government, when it was in opposition. And that in fact, The issue of the issue that has been raised here about a press conference by the president, unfortunately, it doesn't reflect correctly what happened. We have been asked by the ICHR to answer, and we have, and we are awaiting their response to our answer. On the issue of the Cybercrime Act being used to prosecute persons, the Cybercrime Act we had in opposition and now have committed to amending that Cybercrime Act, and that the sedition part is a concern to us as well. However, we must ask the committee that the case that is referred to here, Rickford Burke, who does not live in Guyana, he lives overseas, of Guyanese of origin, but who constantly carries a race line, a division line on our people, attacks people on race, and in addition to that has called for the removal of the government and the overthrow of the government, burn down the buildings, etc., and worse. I would wonder which country in the world would allow that to go on with no response whatsoever. And so, yes, the charges have been brought against him. He's not in Guyana and has not appeared in Guyana, and I'm pretty sure he won't. But he has also brought a case against me personally of a
Recording in progress.
Of $500 million, charging me from United States for libel against him. And so he is also using the same legislation and defamation. There were a number of questions that have been asked. The relation to the police unlawful arrest, misconduct, etc. We talked quite a bit yesterday about the Police Complaints Authority and pretrial detention and so on. We had made it clear that the Bail Act and the Restorative Justice Act, these acts of 2023, will make a major contribution to reducing the level of pretrial detentions in our prisons. In addition to that, yesterday we provided you with information to show the decline in the number of persons who are in pretrial detention in our prisons. We don't have there are a number of procedures which we reported in terms of arrest, what allows arrest by the police, and where the police disobeys these standard operating procedures as well as various legislation, they can be brought to trial. Again, the issues of children in conflict with the law. We do not have data at this point about the number of children who are in conflict with the law. But I do wish to bring to the attention of the committee that our Constitution makes it clear that in all levels, judiciary, legislature, executive, administration, that the best interest of the child is paramount. And this is reflected in the legislation of the Juvenile Justice Act, where the concern of the child and their interest and protection is of paramount importance. Section 3B dictates that the juvenile system shall be separate from that for adults and emphasizes rehabilitation, education, and reintegration. They're also to be subjected to meaningful but proportionate consequences for their offenses. The Act presumes that no child under 14 is capable of a criminal offense. Section 5 provides diversion is the most appropriate and effective way to address juvenile crime, and are presumed adequate to ensure accountability and therefore should be used if adequate. And therefore, the Juvenile Justice Act takes into consideration, one, the best interest of the child. It raised the age of which a child is responsible or considered responsible for their action. It dispensed with the old Juvenile Offenders Act that was repealed, and that children are not kept with adults. There's a special holding center for children while they are waiting their case in court, and also when they're exiting. We must say the issue was asked about challenges, and there are challenges in terms of the judiciary, and I include this in magistracy, being able to hear some of these cases in an expeditious way. And that is of concern to us in the government, that children, if they age out, if because of delays they age out of the juvenile system and they have no system, their case has not been heard, they can be moved to the adult system, as I explained yesterday. These are challenges that we have to overcome. And when we come to the issue of the judiciary, in terms of how we're trying to reduce the pretrial detentions, in addition to what we said yesterday, the number of courts that are built to be able to, there are approximately 13 ongoing projects to build new courts across all regions. Another approximately 12 ongoing projects to rehabilitate existing courts. All regions will have courts and their necessary facilities, including living quarters for the magistrates and or judges that are attending. But we do wish to answer in relation to Indigenous people, that in particular with Region 9, the Rupununi, that there is a court in Letham, the administrative center, as well as in regards to a traveling court to Aishalton, another major area in Region 9. There are new courts that have been built in Bartica, for example, and in Region 1 that have allowed for the first time for persons to have their cases heard in their regions, whereas before they were judges or magistrates going once a quarter, once every 3 months, etc., to hear cases. So it has made a fundamental change in the cases being heard in the areas, reducing the time and the cost to persons who have been charged and who have to appear in court. So this is not just persons who are in detention, but persons who have other cases before the court. On the questions of child labor and trafficking in persons, there was a specific question asked about the 2019-2025 drafting process of the action plan on child labor. We annually report to the U.S. State Department on their issues regarding worst forms of child labor and tips. And the drafting process began in 2019. When we got into government in 2020, the Ministry of Labor held other consultations, which ministries do. They hold their own consultations with relevant agencies to deal with child labor and the plan. And the plan went through some minor changes and it was launched. The issue of children working in dangerous jobs, manufacturing, mining, in farming. Again, we would be interested to hear these reports because we have, in fact, the Ministry of Labor Inspectorate, the Inspectorate of the different work sites of Guyana, where they go and review several thousand every year, that children in Guyana, we have in the primary school level, we have 100% universal adult suffrage. Children attend school. In child labor are laws that you have to attend school up to the age of 15. So that after 15, you can be employed, although, as I reported in my initial presentation, that we are aiming for universal secondary education by 2025. So at this point, over 80% children are in school on a daily basis. However, so our information is that a lot of children who are working are in family businesses, whether it's helping in the farm, the home, etc. But we're not aware of any children in manufacturing, nor in mining. That is prohibited, and the mining officers have to remove children from any mining operation. This is not allowed. So that we would be interested in knowing any specific cases that is referred to. However, this is the we'd like to report and refer to the UNICEF 2019-2020 mix. This is a multi-indicator cluster survey, revealed a strong decline in the prevalence of child labor across all of Guyana's regions. The average percentage of children aged 5 to 70 involved in child labor declined from 18.3% in 2014 to 6.4% in 2019, with 4.9% of children involved in economic activities at or above the age-specific threshold, and that 1.8% were involved in household chores at or above the age-specific threshold in 2019. Therefore, the proportion of children involved in hazardous work also declined to 8% in 2019-2020 compared to 13% in 2014. This is a UNICEF report, and that this has gone down even further based on the number of children that are in school. During the COVID pandemic, schools were closed, businesses were closed, people lost their jobs, as all other parts of the world, and that many children who were 15 and over in particular went and got jobs as working at car washes and at the bus parks, the transportation parks. Access to justice and the backlog of cases. There is a backlog of cases, we admit, in the civil cases and criminal, and that we do not have statistics from the courts on this matter. And as I said, what measures we were asked to reduce delays in criminal cases. We have pointed out new courts, the issue of the Bail Act and the Restorative Justice Act, for example. The Bail Act is particularly targeted to reducing prison overcrowding by reducing the lengthy pretrial detentions, as well as the Narcotic, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Amendment Act, which provides for alternative sentencing by the courts. We also want to refer to the fact that the Restorative Justice Act also provides for the establishment of a Restorative Justice Center as a main body to oversight this, and to have eventually regional centers of restorative justice to ensure that the criminal justice system is responsive and that the number of caseload is reduced, but also increasing use of alternative sentencing. We are also looking at new criminal procedure rules that would help to make the process easier. And this, of course, would be led by the judiciary. One of the legislation that is before the Parliament is the Criminal Procedure Plea Discussion Plea Agreement and Assistance Agreement Bill. Was tabled in December 2023, as well as the paper committals. The paper committals bill of 2023 was also tabled in the National Assembly in February 2024. These two pieces of legislation will assist in expediting cases in court. The first one, the paper committal, provides for the abolition of preliminary inquiries that will therefore allow at least 2 years. It will reduce at least 2 years off the process of having a case concluded, and that the plea bargaining obviously allows for establishment of a system of plea discussions and plea agreements in criminal procedures relating to both summary and indictable offenses. The Judicial Service Commission, and points were made about the President and the appointments by the President. First of all, I will provide with you, before I go to that, let me give you the legal aid clinic data that you sought. As you know, the legal aid clinic is a separate entity. It is independent of the government. It's a legal aid. Legal aid clinic and the Linden Legal Aid Clinic are private entities that receive a subvention from the government. They have not, in recent times, publicized the data that you're asking. We don't have access to that. However, their subvention through the Ministry of Human Services and Social Protection under Social Services shows that between 2020, their allocation of 59.9 million has incrementally increased to 2024 being 92.3 million. The Linden Legal Aid Clinic subvention has also been increased from 2020 of 15.9 million to 2024, 21.6 million. So that this is the government's contribution to ensure that persons, particularly poor and vulnerable, and women in particular, have access to free services. We also reported to you that yesterday of the pro bono initiative to have legal services offered by lawyers through an agreement with the Bar Association of Guyana. We reported on that yesterday, and in terms of them reaching areas of the country, we gave a number of people, over 3,000 people have been able to access since it was launched approximately a year ago. We have a number of issues we still have to report on, and therefore the issue of that has been raised about the president and the appointments and the leader opposition. Okay. Should I stop, Madam Chairman? Because there are many more questions to answer. I can't answer all these questions in 25 minutes.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Teixeira, for the replies furnished thus far. We will now turn to follow-up questions, and then we'll turn things back to you to give the delegation some additional time to respond. With regard to the methodology, I'd just like to clarify a couple of points. Firstly, the committee has received a great deal of information which needs to be clarified and expounded upon, and this is the perfect opportunity for the state to do that, for the state to provide greater detail and more precise information to the committee. Now, we're aware from our side that we've asked a lot of questions, but these questions are asked, they're spurred by the desire of the committee to get clarification on a number of points that we've drawn from the information that you have given to us. And that is why we give the state party the opportunity to respond in writing to some of those questions that the state party isn't able to answer orally. And we do thank the delegation for the effort and the endeavor they're making to answer orally where they can. But I'd like to remind the state party that this is the only opportunity that members of the committee will have to ask questions of clarification, etc., and to delve deeper into certain issues and to feed into our concluding observations. And so we think that this is an important interactive space. It's helpful for the state party to engage in this interactive dialogue so that we can tease out and expand upon issues of clarification. And once again, a reminder that anything we can't get to in the oral interaction this afternoon can be answered in writing in the 48 hours following the conclusion of this interactive dialogue. Mr. Gruja is the first of the speakers for follow-up questions. Please go ahead. Thank you, Chair, and my thanks to you also for having reminded us all of the methodology, because when we get bogged down and caught up in the dialogue, the quality and nature of the replies does improve as people get more natural, more comfortable in the way in which the interactive dialogue is proceeding. But I think it is a useful reminder also to make it clear that there's an additional 48 hours for the state party to answer in writing. For example, they can answer in writing on the questions I asked about the electoral system. I want to pick up on a question asked by my colleague, Mr. El Haiber, on the situation and status of children. And this harks back to a question asked by CEDAW. And this is the whole question or issue of nationality and the way in which it is transmitted to children, in particular to children born abroad. According to information from credible sources and from many such sources that we have received, in domestic law in Guyana, it seems there are problems, both legislative and practical problems, in ensuring that nationality can be transmitted to children born abroad, who thus run the risk of statelessness, particularly when their parents don't have dual nationality. So I'd like to ask whether, since the concluding observations of CEDAW were sent to you, whether the domestic position has changed, the legislation has changed, to ask you what measures have been taken to protect children from ending up stateless. And as I say, this risk of statelessness affects children born to Guyanese parents abroad, in particular single-parent families. The risk of statelessness is run in particular by children born to single Guyanese mothers abroad. And so I'd like to ask for any information about steps taken by the state party to address these concerns and points. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gruja, says the chair. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Quesada. Thank you, Chair. The head of delegation will provide us with replies to some of the questions that we asked in writing, but there are some of the questions that haven't yet been answered, questions on trafficking, aliens, refugees, asylum seekers. Possibly answers for that will be forthcoming, as I say, orally now or in writing. I do have some follow-up questions on the justice system. I would request detailed information as to the measures that have been adopted by Guyana, including legislative measures to fine-tune and improve access to justice. And on this whole issue of access to justice and the steps that need to be taken to improve it, I would request the State Party delegation to provide me with more specific detail on free legal aid and how this is provided to indigenous communities. Are indigenous communities in any way guaranteed access to free legal aid? And if so, how is this provided, etc.? Thank you very much. Thank you for those follow-up questions, Mr. Quesada. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Helfer.
Thank you, Chair, and my sincere thanks to the delegation for taking the time to clarify some of the issues that I raised. That is the purpose of this dialogue, for us to raise various issues and have an opportunity for the State Party to respond. I'm especially pleased to hear that with respect to cybercrime, head of delegation committed or said that there were plans to amend the relevant statute to remove the provision on sedition. I have only 3 points that I did not hear answered, and forgive me if I missed them. We do ask a lot of questions, and so obviously that requires a lot from you by way of response. And one would relate to any plans to decriminalize defamation, whether that is also in the works. The second was with respect to whether the status of the process for amending the Amerindian Act of 2006. And the third and final point is any comment the State Party has with respect to its response to the decision of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in the Isinero versus Guyana case with respect to responding to the alleged violations in that case and the reparations for the indigenous peoples that brought that proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Helfer. The next speaker is Mr. El Khaiba. Thank you, Chair. And I also thank the delegation for the information provided to the committee. I would like to circle back to a question that I asked yesterday on femicides. And I would ask the delegation to provide us in writing, within the set time frame of 48 hours, information as to the number of femicides, information on prosecutions and sentencing in cases of femicides. With regard to children, the committee has taken note of the 2018 law on justice of minors, or juvenile justice. I would like to ask the State Party what steps it has taken to guarantee that the best interests of the child prevail. You yourself referred to that principle earlier. And so I'd like to ask whether the State Party intends to create a specific mechanism for the protection of the rights of children, a mechanism that would be in line with the international standards in the subject area. This is an issue that would be cross-cutting, that would concern various different departments. So if there is no single unified mechanism to monitor and oversee children's rights in place, similar to mechanisms for the prevention of torture, for example, or And I would include the aspect of a mechanism to protect and the rights and well-being of children with disabilities as well, either as part of that broader mechanism or separately. So I'd ask the delegation to provide us with information on that issue, whether any such mechanisms exist or are envisaged. On child labour, we didn't receive any replies or any statistics, that is, particularly with regard to the number of children working in rural areas. In particular, I would ask information about children in Amerindian communities who are working. I understood you to say that your priority is to find ways for children to complete their schooling. But of course, that requires effective mechanisms to guarantee that access to education so that goal can be set. So I'd have a question about the existence of those mechanisms as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. El Khaiber. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Santos Pais.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Unfortunately, my question on the judiciary was on the time limit for the intervention of the delegation. So I hope that this will, at a time, the delegation will be able to comment on my questions. Of course, the concern that I have is that if the head of the executive appoints almost all judicial officers, including members of a Judicial Services Commission, there is at least a suspicion of interference, both government and the legislative leader of the opposition, in the appointment and career of judges and public prosecutors. And so I would insist on the question, and particularly to see whether there are any intentions on the ongoing constitutional process in order to create self-governing bodies for both judges and prosecutors, in order for them to avoid any type of undue influence on by other branches of government. It's not enough just to say that you have independent agencies if the persons that run these agencies are appointed by those that should not appoint them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those follow-up questions, Mr. Santos Pais. The next speaker on the list is the last speaker on the list, Mr. Carazzo. You have the floor. Thank you very much. And once again, I'd like to convey my gratitude to the delegation. Thanks in particular to Her Excellency, Ms. Teixeira, for the very in-depth replies to the questions that I put. I would also like to echo the reminder of the methodology for this interactive dialogue that we were reminded of by the chair, and to underscore the fact that this is intended to be a constructive dialogue. I emphasize that word constructive. It's a golden opportunity for states parties who have submitted their reports to provide additional explanations to flesh out the information in those reports, including responses to contradictory information and reports that may have been received by the committee. So it can be a genuine dialogue. We listened very carefully to the details of the constitutional and legal structure that the Republic of Guyana, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, I should say, has developed, particularly when it comes to the promotion and protection of human rights, as well as the steps and the legislative and other standards that Guyana has developed to promote participation in public affairs and public life. It's a very unique structure that you've established, a very distinct one, and we can see that it provides for the participation of opposition parties in the development of standards for the protection of human rights and for the protection of the right of the people to participate in public and social life, etc. And our hope is that this would also include for the full participation of community representatives, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations. And it would seem that there is room to expand Guyana's approach to ensure the full participation of CSOs and NGOs, which is not yet the case today as a result of actions by the government, the administration, etc. So I think there's particular room to expand the infrastructure you've set up to make greater space for civil society organizations. We are concerned by the text of Article 154 of the Constitution, which provides for the possibility of, in your interpretation and application of human rights conventions and treaties, it provides for the ability, it provides an ability for the state party to reduce the scope or coverage of protection. I was reminded in one of your responses that I hadn't, or it was remarked by you that I hadn't read the second part of your Article 154. I'd like to reassure you that I have read fully Article 154 of your Constitution. And I'm wondering whether, as part of your constitutional reform, this second section of Article 154 of your current Constitution, which provides for the possibility or provides for the option for the government with a vote of 2/3 of the members of the Congress to reduce the level of compliance or to excuse the state from full compliance with the provisions of international treaties to which is a state party. I'd like to ask to what extent you believe that that second part of Article 154, which does provide for this rather troubling option for the state party to reduce its responsibilities in terms of obligations, might be revised or modified, if not scrapped, so that the state party is in a position to live up fully to its obligations under international treaties. A response to that question is of particular interest to this committee. Your Excellency, members of the delegation, we have seen in our region of the Caribbean and Central American, a region from which I also hail, and we've also seen this in other parts of the world, to what extent natural resources have been pillaged, and how natural wealth has been stripped to the bones, and any wealth generated by the use of these natural resources has not been evenly distributed. The desire of this committee, the desire of the human rights architecture writ large, is to support member states, including the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, in processes intended to ensure the best and fairest distribution of wealth derived from natural resources and promote the well-being and the human rights of all people. And those human rights can be enjoyed and respected and upheld by and for the entire population of the country. We have listened in this constructive dialogue to your response, but much of the framework and much of our analysis of the documents provided to us by the Republic of Guyana that are fed into this constructive dialogue are based on that aspiration. We have one further speaker on the list, says the chair. Mr. Ndiaye, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Given that this is the first time that I'm taking the floor in this interactive dialogue with Guyana, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to the Guyanese delegation and to thank them and commend them on the exchange that we are continuing today. I know that Guyana is a fairly unique country in Latin America. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's the only English-speaking country in the continent of South America, and it has a great deal of richness amongst its population, which is a mix of African, Indian, Asian, European descent. But that racial mix has given rise to conflicts in the past. And so I'd like to ask whether there is a policy currently in place in order to ensure that rather than division, there be an appreciation of the richness and wealth that is represented by the diversity of the country, that it be understood along those lines by everyone in the country. Everyone sees that diversity is a strength, and that everybody encouraged to avoid discriminating against anyone else in society on the basis of their ethnic background, etc. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Ndiaye. My thanks to all members of the committee who took the floor in this round of follow-up questions. We now, given that we did not use up all the time set aside for follow-up questions, we have some additional time for the delegation to respond or to seek to respond to the maximum extent possible to the follow-up questions and any other outstanding questions. You have 25 minutes. And with that, I turn things back over to you, Madam Head of Delegation, Ms. Gail Teixeira.
Constructive dialogue always. And we appreciate the questions being asked, but we also find it difficult in a live streaming situation where the public hears and everybody in the world can hear, and we are unable to have enough time to respond to some very detailed questions that are being asked for us. We appreciate that these will be submitted in writing. However, the persons who are in the live stream will not see those answers or hear them. And so that's the disadvantage we're at, and we hope you appreciate that that's the disadvantage that we have. By adding live streaming, which we like and we agree with totally, that we also have to make sure that both parties are in a constructive dialogue of being equally able to respond. There are a number of very important things I want to respond to, and I hope I can do it in the additional time that you made available. I thank you, Madam Chair. The issue to do with 154, Article 154, which the last person has asked. Yes, as we pointed out yesterday, it is a 2/3 majority required in the Parliament to remove or derogate from any human right in our Constitution and or in any of the conventions we have signed. How easy is that, he asks? Very hard. It is very, very difficult to get 2/3 majority in our Parliament. The numbers are not vastly apart. And so the government has 33 seats. The opposition together, there's two parties, have 32 seats. And therefore, 2/3 is not an easy thing. And in addition to that, sir, there are parts of our Constitution that if you wish to change, you have to not only get a 2/3 majority, but you have to go to a referendum. This issue, I'm sure that in the constitutional reform, there may be issues raised, I'm not sure, on this issue. But no government, as far as I know, can capriciously remove these covenants that we have ratified. And so I wish to reassure that we believe that our Constitution builds in protection to these rights. The issue of natural wealth being shared, we have reported here. The increase in allocations for health and education. The fact that in every Armenian village in our society, or indigenous village in our society, every rural village in our society, every municipality, there are schools for children at the nursery, primary, and in the regions, which are large, we have secondary schools where children come in the interior areas where their dormitories provided. And so, as a country of less than 800,000 people and coming from a poor background in the past, we have made amazing changes in terms of free education, free health, subsidized housing, increases in the water availability in interior and rural areas, and electricity. And may I say to the honorable member who has asked the question, the issue of, we have a program, we cannot afford to put in electricity in every single indigenous village or interior far villages. And what we have done is had a program of the solar panels distribution where these communities will get and have been getting in the Lawe program we started under the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ghana Energy Agency. In thus far, 28,952 homes in the interior of our country, in the riverine areas of our country, have received solar panels and will be for the first time being able to turn on lights in their house. This was particularly started in 2015 and was halted when the then government came in afterwards, and it has been resuscitated. And this was particularly designed to allow children to be able to study at night. And that was the impetus of the household solar program. We also have built wells and in many of the villages which didn't have access to clean water before. The issues that have been raised about judges and the Judicial Service Commission and the suspicion of interference. just to go back again, the Judicial Service Commission is appointed as follows. The chair of the Public Service Commission, the Chancellor of the Judiciary, the Chief Justice of the Judiciary, one name that comes from Parliament regarding a lawyer, a legal person who is not active in the profession, and one name who is a lawyer or a judge, retired, that is agreed to between the president and the leading opposition. That is the Judicial Service Commission. So even if the president had sway and was able to convince the leading opposition to appoint a man he liked, the commission itself has other persons on it who are not, who may or may not be supportive. The other issue is that if the point is being made about appointments of judges and prosecutors, the prosecutors are not appointed by the Judicial Service Commission. The Director of Public Prosecutions appoints prosecutors, not the Judicial Service Commission. And her office is also, the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is also a constitutional post, which the Constitution prescribes how that post is appointed. The points that were raised to do with the appointment in the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, and we can come back to that. Yeah, when in the 1999-2001 constitutional reform process, politically at the two major political parties, following a lot of violence, that the effort was made to return to normalcy and to accommodate and to ensure that the opposition party did not feel left out of the process. And so what was built into were certain number of constitutional appointments that under other constitutions, including in the region, that the president or the governor general or the prime minister in other countries would appoint directly, that this would have to be done with the concurrence of the leading opposition, who in actual fact has a veto vote on the appointment by the president. And so too, we designed, and we have to now in the constitutional reform process, which we're starting again, review that. Does that make sense still? The Guyanese people will decide that. But the constitutional Article 127 requires that the Chancellor and Chief Justice to be appointed by agreement of the President of Guyana and the leading opposition. These parties have been unable to agree for some time, resulting in the current situation. Actually, the previous Chancellor and Chief Justice served for years in acting positions to their detriment regarding their pensions and other benefits they would have been entitled to if they'd been fully appointed. It is not a recent occurrence. The former Chancellor and Chief Justice, after the amendment was made in the Constitution, suffered the same fate. And therefore, we have to review these political interventions in the Constitution, which was meant to build harmony and a greater working relationship between the president and leading opposition. We, however, want to make it very clear that this formula has not resulted in control, direction, or lack of independence of the judiciary. And all we have to do is to point to the cases in court, where the two persons, the Chief Justice, has handed down various decisions against that very administration, the former government, and including this government. This includes a decision against the former Attorney General, compelling him to put the Judicial Review Act into effect. More importantly, following the 2020 elections, the last administration challenged the results of those elections in 2 election petitions. The Chief Justice ruled against the election petitions, paving the way for the new administration. In addition to that, the same Chief Justice has handed down decisions that are not in favor of the new government, who came into power following her decisions. The judges of the High Court, including the Chief Justice, has ruled against the government in matters brought by the environmental activists against the EPA. And I have a list of those. But our issue is that, are they being fair? And are they doing what they're supposed to do? And that is to adjudicate in a fair and transparent manner. That is all we ask of them. And so the allegations that they are compromised, we find offensive. And I'm sure the judiciary, if they're listening, would find that too. Hmm? Now, there are a number of issues that the issue to do, so the fact that it said the appointments to do with judges. Let me just clarify that. The Judicial Service Commission makes recommendations to the president to appoint. In fact, the Judicial Service Commission sends a list to the president to appoint. If the president has a concern with any name, he has to put in writing, as stated in the Constitution, disclosing what his concerns are about the particular judge. The Judicial Service Commission will review that and will respond. If they say that they do not accept the grounds on which the president is opposing a particular judge, and they rule in that way, the president has no choice but to appoint. That is the Constitution of Guyana. And in fact, there was a case like that. In the 2012-2015 period, there was a proposed appointment by the then Judicial Service Commission, and the then president was not in favor of one of them because he felt he had been a political activist in a youth organization for decades. The president made his concerns to the Judicial Service Commission in writing. The Judicial Service then responded and said, "You're wrong. We don't agree with you. These facts are wrong." And the president had no choice but to appoint the judge, and that judge is still in the system up to today. So that's an example where, for the first time, there was an issue in terms of a particular judge, and that was resolved as stated in our Constitution, as provided for in our Constitution. There was a rather strange question asked. I must deal with it. And that was to do with nationality of persons born abroad. Our Constitution makes it clear that once you are born of a man or a woman who are Guyanese, you are Guyanese. All it requires is the birth certificate of where they're born, and that only one parent is required, male or female, and that birth certificate is brought in to the birth and registration office, and then the birth certificate of a Guyanese born overseas is issued. So the person will have the birth certificate of their own country where they were born, and a Guyanese birth certificate. There's no application process except to apply for a birth certificate under those grounds. Having got that birth certificate, the person can go straight to the immigration department to apply for a Guyanese passport. We're not aware of any such issues that Guyanese are facing. However, our Constitution nor our laws deal with second generation, so that it is direct descent or birth. And so the Guyanese population is large overseas because of the struggles we had for free and fair elections and democracy. It is estimated that there are over 1 million people overseas. And so we have a situation where there's second generation, and the Constitution nor the laws provide for second generation. Right. So that that this is not an issue as far as we know, but if they are second generation, then our law does not provide for that, nor does our Constitution. And that's an issue, I guess, will come up in constitutional reform, because there are issues to do with the diaspora also that have an interest and will be consulted with the constitutional reform. Many of them want to be able to hold on to dual citizenship and be in parliament and to hold for elected posts. So these are issues all within that. We're not aware of any child being made stateless. Our Constitution and our Citizenship Act prohibit statelessness of children or anybody else, and therefore, and that in fact, we have had a number of cases where we have interceded to assist in favor of the applicants who may be confronted with some situations that the member asking the questions were raised. So we're not aware of any new issues. But we have to recognize we have to obey and work within the law as it is before us, whilst one looks at making changes. There were issues raised earlier which I didn't get to respond to, which I should. There were issues raised to do with the Haitians and the CARICOM Treaty of Chagaramas and what Guyana did. Between 2017 and 2021, there were suspicions that Haitians were being trafficked in Guyana because they would be brought through the airport as a result of the abolition of the visa that countries did in the CARICOM, including Guyana, in 2019, that we had a number of persons would land at the airports here and travel across the country to the other borders, south borders, to go into Brazil, which has asylum seeking. And this went on and went on, including we were able with intelligence service to notice that many of them did not have a passport, but the persons who were handling them had them. A decision was taken when a number of Haitians were found wandering around the jungle, no food, but they were dropped off by a handler and told they would come back and never did because they hadn't paid. And that is when the decision was taken by the government that to remove the six-month no visa requirement to come to Guyana. By that time, a number of countries in the Caribbean and the CARICOM, Caribbean community, had already reversed the 6-month no visa requirement for Haitians. There is no prejudice or bias against Haitians in Guyana. Historically, Guyana has stood by the Haitian people in their struggles against Papa Doc and Baby Doc. And today, we Guyana in particular, as the head of the CARICOM heads of government, our president is heading the CARICOM heads of government at this stage, at this point. The CARICOM heads, as well as the president, have played an important role in trying to return to normalcy in Haiti. And I'm sure the statements and press statements are available, that we do not want to see Haiti be reduced. So that there is no, the Haitians were coming in large amounts. The Venezuelans weren't coming as trafficking in the early part, nor we're aware of that, but they were escaping from their country because of the situation there. There are approximately 40,000 Venezuelans here. A large group of them are Guyanese who went to Venezuela in the 70s, 80s, 90s because of political situation, who are returning with their children. And because they're Guyanese, they are absorbed immediately into the society because they are Guyanese, once they can show that they were born here or they were born in Venezuela and able to access, and one parent is a Guyanese. We have opened our doors to Venezuela in a particular way because we too, as Guyanese, fled to Venezuela in the 1970s and 80s. And they were able to accommodate us. And so we feel it's important for us, our moral duty, to have a humanitarian approach to the Venezuelans. But we cannot accept trafficking of persons. And where we do know of trafficking of persons, and we are able to address those. We wish to remind that under the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering the Financing of Terrorism Amendment Act 2023, the act of smuggling of migrants is now criminalized. It was not criminalized prior to that in the original Combating of Trafficking Act. And so there are very serious penalties for persons who are trafficking migrants. In terms of trafficking in persons, just to advise you that in 2022 and 2023, 3 persons were convicted for the offense of trafficking in persons, 2 males and 1 female, in order to pay a collective sum of 8.4 million Ghana dollars in restitution to the victims. In 2023, 7 new defendants were prosecuted in relation to 28 cases and 32 charges under both trafficking and non-trafficking laws. A number of non-national women have been discovered that they were being trafficked, and they have been were, according to our laws and our policies, they are offered safe haven, they are offered shelters, and that we do not carry out sending people back who are victims of trafficking. And so if they wish to stay, they stay. If they wish to go home, then we try to find a way financially to get them home back to their countries. But there is no, we do not believe in refoulement. And therefore we have a position of enforcing non-refoulement in our country, even though we don't have a refugee legislation or asylum legislation. Regards to data that was asked about refugees, we wish to make it clear that we do not offer refugee status. The UN body here that deals with refugees appears to be handling that, and that we're aware that they have given refugee status to persons, but we don't have that information, nor do we know who the persons are. But however, in Guyana, we have quite a liberal immigration policy, and it is not difficult to be able to get visas into Guyana, nor to get work permits once one has skills or is willing to work. The issue was asked about ensuring legal assistance to persons who are from indigenous communities and remote communities. We had reported yesterday that the process legal aid clinic deals with that as a separate entity. However, we reported yesterday on the Pro Bono 500 initiative, which has been started by the Ministry of Human Services under the Spotlight program, which is funded by the European Union and comes through the United Nations to us. We have a number of interventions so that persons in interior locations can have. There's an important question that was asked about the process for Amerindian consultation on the revision of the Amerindian Act. And I need to be able to say that. The Amerindian Act, I'm not aware of what kind of consultation went on in the former government, but I can report that in 2023, training of persons in the Amerindian Act. So in other words, what we are doing is, first of all, to go back to look at the Act as it is and to train people in terms of leading off in the different villages, and therefore then the discussion on the Act will start. So the exercise of the revision is being executed in collaboration with the National Tushaus Council, which is the legitimate elected authority of the indigenous leaders of Guyana, covered by the Constitution and law, and the Attorney General's chambers. The review process began with the training of 54 facilitators, 14 of which were National Tushau executive members, 25 were community development officers, and 15 CSOs, these are 15 community service officers, to be able, on the Amerindian Act, understanding and how to facilitate consultations in the village. They then transitioned the execution of pre-examination of the Act in cluster form to identify the key areas of revision. This training saw 3,663 Amerindian leaders, secretaries, treasurers, and residents participating at the Amerindian Act 2006 education and awareness workshops throughout the regions of Guyana. Training was also held in regions 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9, including the 20 National Tushaus Council Executive. This pre-examen will now be followed by the interventions looking at the Act itself. This is in adherence to the principle of EPIC and ensuring that all Indigenous people understand the existing legislation to be able to contribute to its strengthening. Village gatherings saw over 3,250 residents, 345 village councillors, and 78 Tushaus were trained, and they continue to be trained. And so the issue of FPIC and involvement of the Indigenous people is critical to our to the revision of the Amerindian Act, as well as the constitutional reform process and any of the major national decisions that our country makes. There were issues raised in relation to mining and Rupununi. And I wish to clarify that a company's name was called here, and I wish to make it very clear that the company does not have a prospecting license. Right. It has a prospective license, not a mining license. And so the company that was referred to by one of the committee members does not mine. They have a prospecting license. They're completely two different mining licenses. In fact, the miners in that area are from the Region 9, Rupununi, who have been given a special license to be able to mine in that area after many consultations between the Guyana Geology and Mines and the Ministry of Natural Resources. Lastly, we want to be able to say that the issue of the Amerindian land titling, maybe you are unaware, and I'd like to inform you that the multi-stakeholder group is the one that on the Amerindian land title is made up of representatives of the non-governmental organizations of the Amerindian people, including also the National Tushaus Council. The Amerindian People's Association sits on that, as does the NTC. And the work plan for 2024, which is before us, has in it 39 demarcations and 24 absolute titles. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So 24 absolute titles and 39 demarcations. This is the 2024 plan of action that has been agreed to by the multi-stakeholder group, which includes civil society. There is no doubt that the problem in Guyana sometimes is that the civil society groups do not recognize other civil society groups and believe that they must be the only ones that are consulted. We go to all the variety of people, whether they're fisher folk, whether they're trade union, whether they're miners, women, etc., to ensure that they're part of major policy and laws that we're bringing in, including constitutional reform. Can I continue, Madam Chair, or I've ended my time? I'm not sure where I am.
No, desafortunadamente.
Unfortunately, head of delegation, we are running out of time. There were even some colleagues who wished to make a few comments before you offered your closing remarks. So at this point, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Santos Pais.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to thank very much the head of the delegation for providing some explanations on the reason of the interference of both executive and legislative on the appointment of judges. I understand the history behind it. I didn't want in the instant to be offensive to the members of the judiciary by Guyana, but I think it's hard that the head of the executive and the leader of the opposition intervene in the appointment of judges. Because, as you know better than I, the question of judges relates to its independence, impartiality, and security of tenure. And you have confessed that first, there is politicization in the nomination of these persons, that there is unsecurity of tenure when you're acting as magistrate, and the fact that there is an interference in the appointment itself raises doubts as to the possible way that people perceive the independence of judiciary. We have to distinguish between the impartiality that the judges exercise and the way public sees them to exercise these impartiality. And that's what concerns me. And that's one of the reasons why I ask what would be the measures to, in a certain sense, increase the confidence of the population of Guyana in their judiciary. And as for the public prosecution, you told us that the Director of Public Prosecution appoints prosecutors, but where then is their internal independence and external independence? So I would sincerely hope that the next constitutional reform or the ongoing constitutional reform would probably look into this with fresh eyes and see if it was not the time coming for the judges and prosecutors to elect themselves without interference by other branches of government. Then you would be sure that there was no interference whatsoever by any other branch of the government except the judiciary itself. Thank you.
Gracias a usted, señor.
Thank you, Mr. Santos Páez. And now it's the time to hear the closing remarks from the head of delegation. You have the floor.
Madam Chairperson, we wish to reiterate what we've been saying here on the advances made in Guyana and the progress that's being made in Guyana, in our country, that the interventions of leaving nobody behind, no person behind, no one behind, is a reality that we're striving for in all the sectors, social sectors, etc. The transformation of our country and its physical infrastructure is to improve communication, access, transportation, reduce the cost for people from various parts of the country, and of course, to enhance business and economic activity, jobs. This is what is our responsibility. And we believe that these are issues that must be noted. Rights in documents, in constitutions are critical. And our constitutional legal framework provide for those rights. But the challenges always come in terms of what is the infrastructure? How is it accessible? How does it work? And that is what a lot of effort has gone into, to create rights commissions for redress, courts that are more responsive and available. And so I understand what the last person said about perceptions. But the proof of the pudding, as they say, is how do the judges rule? If it is that the judges are always ruling for the government, one may have the right to come to that conclusion. But if judges in this country are ruling as they think, even when the government doesn't agree, even when people outside don't agree, then they're doing their jobs. And so we can sit and look at that. I don't know about election of judges in countries where why would a judge be elected? He has to go to the electorate to be a politician? No, that will not happen in Guyana. And so we have developed a construct that we believe allows for the president is given names by. I referred 2 days ago to the fact the Judicial Service has appointed 9 new magistrates and is going through the vacancies to fill 9 new judges. When they finish their process in the Judicial Service, they will send those names to the president. And the president will appoint, whether he disagrees, and as explained earlier, he has a right to disagree. In the appointment of the Judicial Service, it's one person that has to have the agreement between the president and the leading opposition. No one else in the Judicial Service Commission. So I think we have to look at the construct of Guyana to try to ensure that there was an accommodation between the government and leading opposition to work together in a more constructive manner. It may not have worked as was conceived by those in the constitutional reform process of 1999, 2001. And one of the last speakers, the gentleman who didn't ask questions during the committee, he asked for how do we deal with the issues of ethnicity and perceptions, etc., in a multi-ethnic society. And these are some of the constructs we've come up with. These were done together, Guyanese together, trying to answer this issue. And so even in the GCOM, the issues are raised with the Elections Commission. We brought in legislation to try to remove any lacunas or ambiguities in the election laws that would have allowed what happened in 2020 elections, where the senior officials of GCOM, with the former members of government, tried to thwart and to defraud the Guyanese people of their right to elect the government of their choice. And this was supported by the United Nations Security Council, Secretary General, the Commonwealth head, the OAS head, Almargo, and also Carter Center. So that the issue of 2020 elections was not to do with ethnicity. It was to do with a power struggle by the then government and the conspiracy of the senior-most persons in the election machinery to rig an election. It had nothing to do with ethnicity. And the second issue, we've had elections after that, of the 2023 local government elections, where 80 local authority bodies were voted in. And that, again, there was no violence, there was no issue of ethnicity, there was no issue of fraud that was raised in that period. So that we hope that the changes in the local government election was held under the new amendments that we made to the Representation of the People's Act. The issue of transparency is one that is important to our society, and so we are built in a number of ways to have transparency. These are new interventions with, as I point on the very first day that we are creating digital platforms. The country was not connected. The country is being connected. And therefore, these access to various services, as well as being able to have data produced in a timely manner, will improve. But many of these interventions are a year old, less than a year old, 2 years old. And so we cannot produce some of the information you request. But I do want to say that Guyana is a country that democracy and the restoration of democracy and its uneven path to building democracy has taught us many lessons and created many unique features which you would not find in the rest of the Western Hemisphere, not in Latin America, not in the Caribbean, because we've had to address our challenges by ourselves. But democracy and freedom of expression, the right to express your views, is not isolated to one group of people. Every citizen and the government and the opposition and anybody has a right to their views, political views, criticism, etc. But it cannot be a situation where a small group of people seem to be wielding a tyranny of the minority that believe that they alone are the conscience of Guyana, regardless of what the government says, regardless of what any other NGO says. Any NGO that does not agree with them that then gets labeled as pro-government, which is unfair to them. And so we want to build a democratic nation, but we don't want anarchy. We will not allow anarchy, because what would have been called gossip years ago is now become, thanks to the social media and websites, it has become now fact. And so we are not referring to anything particular any committee member said, but the national stakeholders of Guyana and the civil society organizations are hundreds of organizations, not 3 or 4, not 5. There are many more that have opinions and play a role in their communities, whether it's in charity or valuable work with children, after school programs, domestic violence. They are important too, and their views are important too. And so we don't want to see the 21st century Jacobinism, where those who shout the loudest and those who have access to social media are the ones who determine the fate of any country or any issue that is available or being dealt with. This will lead to the dismantle of democracy. We have fought too long to build it, and therefore we accept that we haven't reached where we want to go yet. That there are many challenges we have. But again, we're a small developing country with less than 800,000 people. And that the speed at which we're going with our transformation, we need many more people in our country. We need many more skilled laborers and investments. And that is what we're investing in, as I said in the initial presentation and on the first day in regards to that. So that we accept and have always accepted the treaty bodies and reviewing. But it is difficult. I find it difficult to be asked here to answer on an issue with IACHR and Asinaru, when as far as I know, we are not concluded the process with the IACHR on the Sinhu issue. And so I'm not even aware that certain documents are public in the public realm. So that I cannot answer on that, and I will not answer on that, because I believe that even when we've said to the ISHR that some of these same matters are being dealt with by another UN body, the ISHR tells us that there's no need, they can go to several international bodies at the same time. So we're inundated with petitions by a small group of people who are well financed. We don't want to demilitarize.
So sorry. We don't have an interpretation. You already use all the time allowed. Te dije, Gabriela. No, no está bien esto. Well, I would like to thanks to the delegation here in Guyana for this presentation, and we don't have more time, so we had to finish in this way. It's not appropriate, but is all the time was already used. So I would like to apologize with the interpretation cabin. And no, ya está. Bueno, thank you very much.
Hi, sorry about that. So that's what has happened there. Uh, Gil Teixeira basically, I was talking without the mic earlier, so my apologies. Gil Teixeira just strayed from the truth. She ran as far as possible from the truth. We all know the truth. We all know they were running to cover up, running to hide, running to shield themselves. There was no defense. There was absolutely nothing they could have done. And even if they attempt to cover up something, it wasn't. Yeah. it wasn't working at all. It just wasn't working. And which is a good thing because all of you heard for yourselves, some of you probably for the first time, and I've been reading your comments. Um, no one is walking away thinking that Gail Teixeira walked off the stage, so to speak, with any points scored. None whatsoever. She has lost every round on behalf of the corrupt PPP regime. She has lost every single round. It was surprising, I don't know if it was to you guys, that she was totally unaware that judges can be elected by the people. District attorneys are elected by the people in some jurisdictions. I'm surprised that she didn't know that. That, for example, in New York, there are lawyers who can run for a judge position, whether it's in Brooklyn, whether it's in Queens, whether it's in Staten Island. People do that all the time. And what the argument was there that was made by the individual of the Human Rights Commission committee was basically it is difficult to for the citizenry to look at the judiciary and say that there's not political biases when you have judges that are being appointed, selected, and appointed with the approval of both the president and the opposition leader. That's the point that was being made. Gail Teixeira now is saying, trying to say that there were other members of the Judicial Service Commission that were not appointed by the government. And so she stopped short of saying that those other members got the blessings of the government of the day. And that's all. She never mentioned that, but we all knew that. And I'm sure that those members of the commission, the committee, of course, they are very, very smart men and women on that committee. So they knew better. The other thing she spoke about in terms of mentioning was bold enough to hint as though the director of public prosecution's office is independent of the PPP regime. Far from it. We have seen lots and lots of cases. For example, the situation with David Patterson, a member of parliament, who was, according to them, he was caught urinating. And I believe that he said he had to just urinate in a dead end. And no pun intended on that. Urinating in a dead end area. He was charged. We hardly hear of that. There's so many ministers in the PPP regime who go around. They do all sort of dirtiness, whether urinate, probably other things in the streets and so forth. They've never been charged for that. Uh, David Patterson was charged. He won his case. He won. He walked out. He won. And guess what? The director of public prosecution said, hey, wait a minute. No, 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 no. We don't like how this ended. And therefore, we are going to reinstitute the charges against him. No, we are appealing it. We want this charge of urinating in the streets. No, we want another magistrate. And that's how the DPP operates. And so when you contrast that now with this pilot who was charged with trafficking in person, his matter was recently dismissed out there in a court in Bartica. His matter was dismissed. Lack of insufficient evidence and blah, 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 blah. It was dismissed. Now, in all fairness to the pilot Charles, if they don't have evidence, it was dismissed, it's done with, it's gone. Well, his luck strikes. He's gone. That's it. The point is now, do you think the DPP is going to appeal that matter? Do you think so? There was a guy who alleged to have killed his fiancee out there not so long ago in Berbice, somewhere from Hampshire side, under quarantine. He walked out free as well. Is the DPP going to ask that the matter be appealed again? No. And so I am saying all of this just to let you guys see what is happening in terms of the discrimination and the politicization of the director of public prosecution's office, and some members of the judiciary. Some, note, I'm saying some, not all. And so that's exactly what's happening in Guyana. And we know that the human rights groups, whether at the United Nations, whether the OAS, wherever, they keep an eye on what's happening. Some of them may not be on the ground, but they have ears on the ground. Some of them are on social media. They do their stuff. They got their homework. And I say kudos to those members of the commission. I tell all of you this, that those folks have done their homework. They didn't sit somewhere knocking a glass of high wine or whatever, or even if they did, they were doing their homework. They went directly to the sources. They got their evidence. They have done their homework. What they have done there, it has nothing to do with propaganda, factual stuff. And Gail Teixeira was caught with her, what should I say? Okay. She was caught with her cigar out of her mouth. She was caught and she couldn't recover. So what they are going to do now, they are going to try to spin this. You know, they like spinning things around. You know, cheap propaganda. That's what they are going to do. As what they started since yesterday. Let me just read part of what they started yesterday. Where is it? Okay. All right. I'll get to it, guys. Just bear with me for 30 seconds. I must and I will find it. Didn't. Here. I guess. All right. I will find it. I'm reading some of your comments. Ian William Sook. Oh, gosh, Guyanese and these names. William Sook. How are you doing, Ian? Ian Williams Sook. Or Williams Okay, I guess probably that's what it is. To say, hey, Mark, these people have done, talking about the UN guys, have done their investigation from credible individuals, just like Vice News. So Gail really looked stupid lying, of course. Of course. Of course. That's exactly what has happened there. So the other thing is they have started the propaganda, and this is where the opposition, and when I say the opposition, I mean the opposition, the AFC, the APNU, the PNC, the WPA, everyone, every single legitimate opposition, sincere opposition people, not the Schumann and those are not opposition folks. They're soup drinkers in the PPP. So now, in one of their mouthpieces, propaganda news, online news agency, it says here, individual query cannot derail the positive report that Guyana is receiving at the UN Human Rights Committee. That is according to Irfan Ali. Now, I wish to repeat this here, guys. Irfan Ali, in one of their propaganda news agency, online news outlet, news, you guys know which news closet or whatever they call themselves. He is saying here that Irfan Ali, that is, the query, well, let me read from the top. It says the United Nations Human Rights Committee has given the government a positive review over the last 2 days. Come on, guys. Have we been watching or listening to the wrong thing? We watched yesterday, so for those of you who did. We watched today. Is there a review or just questions asked? But yet the propaganda outlet, on behalf, of course, of the PPP, they started the propaganda by saying that this report gave them a positive, some positive. They reported in the media falling, what is it? Raised by his. Sorry, let me read it again because it's funny. They're saying the United Nations Human Rights Committee has given the government a positive review over the last 2 days, despite a query raised by a single member of the committee, which was separately reported in the media following the narrative of the political opposition. So, in other words, you notice how wicked. Let me get closer to the microphone so that I can emphasize on this particular word, wicked. If you can echo, if you can keep repeating this, wicked, 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 like the DJs them, they spin the was it the record and it go wicked, wicked government. That is what they have done. So they're saying now that that one member, oh, damn it, that one member, that one culprit, that is what they're saying. That all the other folks love them. They love us and they gave us a positive review. But that one katahar, that one member, oh, if we can catch him, if we can strangle him, if we can probably pull a crummy wing on him or whatever, whatever. You know what I mean? You guys know exactly what I mean. That is why I like this audio only so that you guys cannot see my face, my facial expression. You know what I mean, right? So that they now hate that one member who is a bad wolf. He's bad. The opposition folks are feeding him. Yes, he must have because he's peddling the same narrative of the opposition. Oh, he's bad. How dare that member? Oh, we can pull a crummy wing or a waddle on him if possible. You know what I mean? All right. So sorry, it's 26 minutes after 12 o'clock in beautiful Guyana. 26 minutes after 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I don't know what time it is where you are, but hello to all of you. Now let's continue with the propaganda by the PPP, exposing the propaganda by the PPP in their propaganda news outlet, media outlet that they're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to. Hundreds, yes, Maria Vera, hundreds of millions of dollars to. This is what the query, and I quote here, according to the propaganda outlet, the query did not go unnoticed, particularly for echoing the unfounded narrative of the political opposition, rather than adopting an approach grounded in facts and evidence. And so, Gail Teixeira is saying that that lone member of the committee, me, if we can just rip his shirt off and just give him some cigars to smoke, or we can pull a crummy wing or a waddle in him or whatever. They just don't like that. And so they're painting this picture right now that the committee, the UN Committee on Human Rights, painted this magnificent report on them, that the regime in Guyana is doing so well when it comes to human rights, when it comes to freedom of the press, freedom of expression, when it comes to judiciary, when it comes to extrajudicial killings. Nothing. No, not the PPP. Somebody else. Indigenous people are happy. Persons of African descent are happy. East Indian Guyanese are happy. Everybody happy under them. The judges are happy. The judges are not. They're not. There's no political interferences. There's nothing. Jagdir doesn't cuss out judges. They don't cuss out magistrates. Sorry about that, guys. They don't. They don't. And Gail Teixeira stood there. I don't know, with that facial expression, thinking that people, oh my gosh, look at that. She is basically saying nothing is wrong with Guyana. Guyana is just a perfect place. Where is that lone member of the committee is getting his information from? He got it from the opposition. It's the opposition line, and it's the opposition lies they're peddling. How dare you come on board with the others? I don't know what the others talking about, because many of those questions she couldn't answer. And many of those questions, it's not as though they painted a good picture of the government, the PPP regime, is that those guys were diplomatic. They found other ways and means to say that the government of Guyana fish up. And that's a better term, a nicer term to use, fish up. If I want to use it, beginning with how you spell the first letter there is F, right? Somebody hold me back, man. And so these committee members don't want to tell them that the government of Guyana, they said the government of Guyana is fish up. But they smile in saying it, a nice smile, and say, welcome. And we welcome the head of the team from Guyana, and they smile, and that's it. But let's continue with this propaganda from the news closet, or whatever they call themselves. And this is what Irfan Ali said yesterday when he was contacted by the propaganda news outlet. Quote here: first of all, and this is, mind you, I don't have the best of Irfan Ali's voice, but according to the news outlet, this is what Irfan Ali said. Quote: first of all, this issue was not raised as a somebody help me with this word in the audience, please, because we're pretending this is Irfan Ali here. Substantive. Substitutive. Can somebody please in the audience help me with this word? It's substantive. Substitutive. Substitutive. I'll start over again. And this is Irfan Ali, not necessarily me. First of all, this issue was not raised as a substantive matter by the HR committee of the UN. An individual member who is obviously fed with the propaganda of the opposition. Operatives, operatives, operatives raise a query, query, in line with the narrative of the opposition, trying to paint the government in a particular light. End of quote. So said Irfan Ali. And I wish to repeat now in my voice. First of all, the issue was not raised as a substantive matter by the HR committee of the UN. An individual member who is obviously fed, note who is obviously fed with propaganda. So the lone person, according to them, they painting this impression to their audience that the only person who disagreed with them is following the line of the opposition. Then he went on and he said the reference to corruption was not based on any evidence or facts, but was more or less parroted position by an individual on the committee. Unfortunately, this member found himself in a trap that the opposition historically used against the PP. Oh, Father. So in other words, he is saying, Irfan Ali of all persons is saying that that lone member fell into a trap. Oh, man. I don't. These folks are something else. They have no shame, none whatsoever, saying that the lone member fell into a trap, an opposition trap. I don't know what's going on with these guys. A trap? We all saw, we all heard. Again, we all saw, we all heard. But look at these guys. I don't know. Blaming the guy, it went on, he went on, same thing, he went on, and quote here. It is interesting that the very individual did not mention the fact that the very persons making the complaints individually and collectively tried to steal the election. What does that have to do with anything? And I wish you guys can see my face right now, but you can't. No makeup on. Good. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Oh, the stealing of elections. Did a court conclude on the matter? Did a court say that the opposition stole an elections? Did that ever happen? Now, on the issue of stealing an elections, with the evidence that we have, and the public that is, it points more in the direction of the PPP stealing the elections. It points more in the direction, and heavily, that the PPP was installed. That is it. If you were talking about anybody rigging an elections, it's the PPP, because the opposition wants the elections petitions to be heard. Unfortunately, it is the PPP, through their minions, have fought for the elections petitions not to be heard every step of the way. They found ways and means to stop it, to block it, stop it and block it, because they are afraid of what would have come out of those elections petitions. The end results of those court cases, the elections petitions, the conclusion would point in the direction that the PPP rigged the damn elections. And that's what happened. And that is why the PPP is afraid of the elections petitions. That is why they rush to charge and persecute Roxanne Myers, Mingo, and Lewinfield, in order to brainwash the public to give the impression that something sinister happened. Now, even if something sinister happened, where is the evidence? We can conclude that something sinister really happened, but we are seeing the evidence that it is the PPP that conducted themselves in a sinister manner. The evidence is there. Look, 61 dead voters. Now suddenly Jack Dale wants voters off the list. 4,864 absent voters. 150 stuffed ballot boxes, mainly in PPP controlled areas. 47 ballot boxes without documents. Without documents. Where else? You guys know what 47 ballot boxes are? Mainly in PPP controlled areas. Missing oaths of identity. 1,268, guys. 1,268. Sorry. Something like Desmond Hoyt and Granger there. 1,278 missing oaths of identity. Nonsense. But yet these people continue to peddle this falsehood that the opposition, PNC, AFC, the coalition, rigged the elections. There is no evidence of that, except the only evidence that we are aware of is that the PPP has rigged the March 2020 general and regional elections. And if we don't keep our eyes open, they're going to want to rig again, as they have rigged in the past, because history and evidence would show that the only party with evidence that has rigged elections in Guyana, it is the PPP. The PPP was caught rigging in the 1997 elections, when in 2000, I believe 2000, sorry, the High Court judge then, Claudette Singh, I think you guys know who Claudette Singh is, right? If you don't know who Claudette Singh is, please let us know. But Claudette Singh, hi, Claudette Singh was the judge. Claudette Singh in 2000 vitiated the elections. In other words, there were wrongdoings. And based on the outcome of that ruling, we had to have fresh elections. And fresh elections were held, in March of 2001. In my David Granger voice and Desmond Hoyt voice in 2001. It was a PPP that caught. And the opposition then won the elections petition. They won it. Who was it? Was it Esther Pereira, I believe? Won the elections petition. Claudette Singh. Jagdev never forgave Claudette Singh. All manner of things he did to her. All manner of things. Oh, yeah, Claudette was my good friend, you know. I know. I could tell you. Because in 2001, going into late 2001, they were supposed to appoint a chief justice. There were a couple candidates. Two serious candidates were Claudette Singh and, let me see if you guys remember the other guy's name, another Singh. Let me see if you all know his first name. I know his first name begins with a C, but let me see if you guys know. It was between Claudette Singh and the other Singh. Claudette Singh and the other Singh. Now, the other Singh didn't have the qualifications, even though he was a lawyer and so forth and so on. I believe there was an issue back then when he didn't practice for more than 7 years. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Carl Singh didn't practice for more than 7 years. And the PPP, having this history of circumventing the law, the Constitution, all manner of things they do, Carl Singh was chosen. And for some reason or the other, someone in the reform component was able to convince then opposition leader, Mr. Desmond Hoyt, that Carl Singh was a better candidate than Claudette Singh, and that Carl should get the blessings from the opposition leader. One of these days, I know I keep promising to write a book. I know both Carl, I know Claudette Singh. During those days, I met with them, of course, privately, secretly. I have nothing more to say at this point in time. Absolutely nothing more, other than Claudette now, and we talk about rigging of elections and winning elections petition. The PPP got caught with their pants down on numerous occasions. Let's fast forward now to 2006. 2006, the PPP attempted to rig the elections also, but they decided that they are going to steal a seat. Thief men, electoral thieves. In 2006, they decided now, possibly with the help of senior ones at the Guyana Elections Commission. They were chairman of the Elections Commission back in 2006. I believe it was Surge Bali, and then the chief elections officer, Gokul Budu. I don't know what they did, whether they were part of the skullduggery. I don't know, mind you. You see my facial expression? Just imagine. I don't know. I'm not going to say they knew what happened, but they got caught with their pants down because a seat from Region 10 was stolen from the AFC and given to Sam Hines. After they got caught, the chief elections officer, Gokul Budu, told them they have to go and file an elections petition because there's nothing else GCOM can do. They're aware that the seat was stolen. They were aware that the seat didn't belong to the PPP, but They took it. Guys, they took that seat. They stole that seat from the AFC, the Region 10 seat. They stole it. They take it. They grab it. So who, having said all of that, who more appear to be electoral fraudsters and thieves? The coalition, the PNC, the PPP, the PNC, the APNU or whatever, the AFC, or the PPP, or the WPA. Based on the evidence, chaps. Oops, sorry. I'm calling everybody chaps. Y'all know me already, man. Oh, man. Guys, folks, it points in the direction that the PPP are electoral fraudsters, are criminals when it comes to thieving elections, when it comes to rigging elections. The facts are straightforward. This is not propaganda. I don't preach propaganda. The facts are there. 1997 elections vitiated. Elections were called 2001. After the 2001 elections, we had elections in 2006. What happened in 2006? They stole a seat from the AFC. So for 5 years, Sam Hines, aka Kirsten Isle guy, sat in a stolen seat for 5 years. Stolen seat. Nobody pull him over and say, hey, are you the driver of this car? Are you in the driver's seat? You stole this car. They stole the seat from Region 10. And to this day, they have never apologized for that. They have never apologized for their skullduggery in the elections of 1997. They never apologized. They need to apologize to the people of Region 10. They deprived the people of Region 10 adequate representation by thieving the seat. And I don't know, Sam Hines sat there for 5 years. Barefaced thieves, these PPP vagabonds are. Electoral thieves. Oh, let it go through an elections petition. Now let's go to 2011, since we're on the issue of rigged elections. They love to talk about that, especially in the eyes of the international community, feeling that the people are going to be sympathetic to them. When a lot of those people know that there was a change of regime, obviously the PPP being installed. So let's go to 2011. In 2011, there was a minority government. But before there was a minority government, there was an attempt to rig the elections again. But they got caught with their pants down. They couldn't rig it because international eyes were there. There was no oil, there was nothing. So the international guys wanted to ensure that there's democracy, right? Not democracy Mike Pompeo style. And so the PPP, and let me get closer to the microphone for you guys. The PPP was caught in an attempt again to steal a seat in the 2011 elections. 1 second, let me just grab some water. Mind you, thank you so much, guys. Mind you, you heard I say water, right? Even though I reside overseas now, I don't say water. Like some of you going easy about water. You go some places and you get some family members and relatives and all about water. Derek Arjun, do you say water too? Any of you guys in the audience say water? Don't say it around me, please. It's water. Water. Can I have a bottle of water? So back to the 2000 elections. Sorry about that, guys. Back to the 2000 elections. The 2011 elections. Sorry. Water. The 2011 elections, they attempted to steal a seat. But as they were about to stamp on that final document, there was an objection. Hey, hold on. No. Vincent Alexander, Commissioner Dirajikam, got a quick note from, a particular individual, and Say, hey, them a thief. Look, them a thief. Right? And they got caught. And that is how they sat there at GCOM headquarters and they went through it again and they knew that they were about to steal that seat. But, thank, thanks to that individual who slipped that note to Vincent Alexander, thanks to that individual, the PPP knows who that individual is. They never forgive that individual. All at his funeral, is the day that he died, they're glad that he died, all manner of things. That person slipped that note to Vincent Alexander. Vincent ran with it. Thank you, Vincent. But thanks more to that person who slipped that note to Vincent. And so the 2011 elections, they were about to rig it with that one seat, which would have given them a majority in the government. And so they had to go through with a minority government. A minority government. And so they combine opposition in parliament, that is. They weren't like an official opposition. The AFC had their seats doing their thing, and the PNC had their seats doing their thing. And so they decided now that they're going to have a no confidence motion against Donald Ramatar's government. And Donald, frightened, became afraid, started trembling. They're cussing up at Freedom House. Jack there cussing up. Donald cussing up. But Donald and his kids and everybody were happy back then by sweet jobs, all kind of thing. Oh, we'll talk about that some other time, right? Yeah. And so they're cussing up Matty. They want to kill Matty at Freedom House. Don't think that they don't fight amongst themselves. Don't think that they don't fight publicly. They do that too. Remember when Irfan was running and enough of them PPP people start condemn him, say he can't talk, and he this, and then I want no Muslim people rule them and all kind. Hey guys, don't think that is, I notice some PNC people that say, why is only PNC people as Gus Matty? No. These guys are vicious when they're cussing each other. You ever hear Jack Dave cuss Ramjatan and Moses and them? He call them Nimakaram, them a Katahar, them a Korhi, them a Lolal. Man, oh gosh. Anyways, let's not get distracted from the 2011 election, which were rigged or attempted by the PPP regime. And so the no confidence motion was set. It was supposed to reach the parliament for a vote. But Donald Ramatar, with his tight tongue, heavy tongue, I am going to prorogue parliament. And they prorogued parliament and elections in 2015. The coin was flipped, and the coalition got a one-seat majority. Oh, Father. A one-seat majority. One-seat majority. And I'll end this discussion for another time. One-seat majority. And so the People's Progressive Party, Gail Teixeira, Irfan Ali, is the last person who should be talking about electoral fraud. In fact, he's the last person who should be talking about fraud. Fraud should never come out of his mouth. The word fraud, F-R-A-U-D, fraud. I almost spell it there like Irfan. Fraud should never come out from Irfan's, sorry, I almost said air fraud. Irfan's mouth should never. 19 fraud charges. 19. How many guys? You guys in the audience there, how many fraud charges? 19 fraud charges. Which other presidential candidate you heard banned from going into another country? He was on his way to Canada. Dress up, nice shoes, bobby socks, big pants, belt, beat up belt, dingy shot, heading to Canada. The Canadians said, no, we don't want you here. They blocked him. He came out and he was upset, of course. Why they blocked me? He knows why they blocked him. He and some of those businessmen in Canada, those so-called businessmen in Canada, some of them doing business in Guyana, no, they know why he was blocked. Irfan Ali knows why he was blocked. He promised that he's going to say why he was blocked. Can somebody ask him why he was blocked? He promised that he's going to say. He never said anything. Never said anything, guys. Y'all know why, right? 19 fraud charges, and every minute he wants to talk about fraud, elections fraud, and make it look as Lowenfield and Mingo and Roxanne Myers that they continue to persecute those individuals. And he's talking about fraud. Jack Dale, they could talk about fraud and thieving. Go back to what Sue said about Jack Dale. They don't want an investigation in these things. Let us remind you guys about the $214 million that was supposed to be audited by Exxon. 214 million US dollars. And these people want to talk about fraud. The contracts, fraud. All these sort of things, the awarding of contracts, fraud. Money to build schools, fraud. Take a look at what's happening in Linden. The school wouldn't even be completed for April, as they promised. Fraud all over. Air fraud. You're right. Air fraud. Hope the opposition picks up and do something. Press conferences, and they got to be a little more, by far more aggressive in dealing with this corrupt PPP regime. You can't expect a lifeline of hope from outside agencies. You have to expect that. And these sort of information and going after the regime should not only be saddled, or the burden should be saddled with those who are outside of Guyana through some agencies and these sort of different things. I know the UN Human Rights Report, the committee report today, and the questioning offer you guys some hope. And of course, some of you are saying, we all knew this. Yes, it is a fact. But now is the time, my friends, that the opposition has to up the ante. The combined legitimate opposition has to up the ante. We shouldn't be hearing from some of these guys who are in leadership positions in the opposition only when something happens to them. We need to hear from them as often as possible. We hardly do. But when we call them out, they get upset. You let Jack Dave say anything about any one of them tomorrow, or Irfan say anything about any one of them. You're going to see how quick they're going to rush out, press conference. They're going to want to go on programs and talk. Of course, yes, they should do that. But don't wait until your name is called on something, then you're energized to go and speak. Speak now as well. The people, majority of the people of Guyana are depending on the opposition, the combined opposition. And once we have a unified opposition, not unification for the sake of plastering a big sore, proper unification with proper persons, that we can package those individuals and be prepared for the next elections. And we know fully well that the PPP will be beaten. That's one other thing. Let's not jump and say the PPP, the opposition has already won. Don't tell your supporters that the opposition has already won. Don't tell your supporters that. Do what is necessary to galvanize your support base. They're split, they're divided, they're upset in some instances. And when we have rallies and things, we need more numbers. We need more numbers. I know we can do it. Put competent persons in places that could speak on behalf of the opposition, to proper PR individuals. All can play a role, whether you're proper or you're not proper. But those are the ones who are not proper should know that there's a limitation when it comes to hanging their hats. Some of the non-proper ones are the ones who want to hang their hat. Hi. Anyway, let me get out of here. I'm being a little naughty here, throwing a little shades, right? All right, guys, I'm out of here. See you guys later tonight. It's been a long morning. Well, it's now afternoon. God bless you all of you. So long.
Yeah, my name is Jasnity Kaldata Francis Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my X next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data.
Oh, Jesus Christ, if cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. Flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta get about $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now. A weekend man, a monthly man, and a fortnight man.
Eve more or a border. And from someone, a low life like that, you